Hi, this is Lynn McCool, and I'm here to discuss with you the persuasive speech assignment details. Remember that the persuasive speech is going to be on the same policy topic as your AFC speech. This time you have 10 to 12 minutes in which to deliver this speech, and there are some additional submission requirements that were not included in the AFC speech. You will need to submit a full sentence outline again. You will submit a 20-source annotated bibliography. You will also be using visuals in this speech, so you need to use at least one visual. It could be a PowerPoint or just an image that you project behind you, or it could be multiple images that you project throughout the speech. It depends on your topic and on what you feel would best visually support the text of your speech. I am asking, though, that you do not use any video in your speech. And then you will need to create a reflection after you've watched your speech, reflect over the delivery of your speech. Let's go back for a moment and talk about the annotated bibliography. The annotated bibliography is a 20-source bibliography, which means that you will take the original 10 sources that you used in the AFC speech, and you will add an additional 10 sources to that. And you can use that additional 10 sources in any way you choose. So if you want to use all 10 of those sources to help create and support the argument that you are arguing for or trying to persuade us of in the persuasive speech, that's fine. If you want to split them up between the argument and the counter argument, you can do that as well. You decide how you want to use the 10 additional sources. The purpose of this speech is to employ everything that you've learned this semester to make the strongest case possible for the side for which you choose to argue. So your persuasive speech is your magnum opus. Think of it as really it's your final in a sense, because we are pulling together everything that we've talked about, everything that you've learned, and you want to demonstrate to me and to the audience that you're able to put these principles into practice. The structure of the speech, you are going to be using again those speech basics that you've learned so far, and the goal is to persuade your audience to agree with you on your stance on your topic. Now, you will have to argue persuasively for your side. You will also have to refute the other side and also anticipate and overcome some potential objections to your point of view. You may be able to convince some people for your side, but to be fully persuasive, you've got to anticipate and address those questions that arise in their mind. This isn't as difficult as it may seem because, in a sense, the persuasive speech is a very natural speech. It almost writes itself. You've been persuading yourself most likely which side of the issue you will embrace for some weeks now, and you'll need to do this in your speech and gather those lines of argument together, the ones that you've already been mulling over in your own mind. Then you'll walk the audience through those arguments, and you should have a pretty decent speech. Of course, it's not really that simple. You do have to frame your arguments in a manner that reflects the mastery of the course content, but this is a good place to start. So let's talk about the basic moves that you will need to make one at a time for this particular speech. First of all, in the introduction, you should have a little bit of time where you recap the issues that constitute the heart of the matter that you identified in the analysis of the controversy assignment. Next, the main argument or the main body of the speech is where you will argue your case. You'll treat each of the questions at the heart of the matter in turn, giving your audience all the reasons you can weave artfully together within the given allotted time. And don't forget that there are some additional things that we have looked at in the course material that can help you. So for example, don't forget the 4 keys. If you click on that link, it will take you to this page on the Patrick Henry website. And here's a good reminder about how to structure your speech so that it is engaging and lively and something that the audience wants to listen to. In addition to the main argument then, once you've finished that, you will move into what's called the counter argument. And those of you who are in debate are familiar with this idea. In the counter argument, what you want to do is briefly and respectfully describe the opposing viewpoint. Remember, a really persuasive speaker not only names his or her case, but also refutes the others, but he also anticipates and overcomes potential objections to his or her arguments. Now you might be asking, how in the world can I do that? Well, it's not as hard as it sounds. What you want to do is reflect on the process you went through to persuade yourself which side to defend. There were no doubt thorny questions that really gave you pause along the way. So you can anticipate that similar questions will arise for some of your audience members during the speech. All you have to do is try to anticipate when that question might arise, raise it by means of a rhetorical question, and then discuss it. For example, let's say you're arguing for capital punishment. At some point in your speech, you're going to have to deal with the point or the objection that it entails cruel and unusual punishment, which is constitutionally prescribed. What I would do is, at that point of the speech, this is where I would anticipate some members who would be thinking, hey, wait a minute, that sure sounds like cruel and unusual to me. I would acknowledge the question, admit that I've grappled with it myself, then quote some authorities on the subject. People who learn to make this move at just the right time are excellent persuasive speakers. After you address the counter-argument, then you want to move into the rebuttal. This is going to refute the opposing side you disagree with. Remember that refutation is a big part of argumentation, and this is where the excerpts from Weaver's chapter on argumentation will come in handy. Notice I've provided the link for you again here, and so you can click on that and go to his reminder about that. In addition, there it is. So there's his chapter on argumentation. In addition to this, you'll want to review over the fallacies and the common material fallacies pages on the Patrick Henry website as well. Those will provide you with a good refresher of those lines of argumentation that are not valid, and those will be important to you as you are doing your refutation to point out those parts of your opponent's arguments that are not valid, that do not hold the test of argumentation. And so you want to name and explain any fallacies you find within the counter argument there. Remember that you want to just identify 2 or 3 of those fallacies. You don't have a lot of time, so you can't spend the entire time critiquing the opposing argument. You just want to find 2 or 3 fallacies that are the most potent or salient, that if you can defend those or break those apart, they will give you the strongest element of argumentation. Finally, you want to move into the conclusion after you have finished the refutation, and there are 3 primary moves to that conclusion. First of all, you want to signal that you're about to close, and that could be as simple as "so in conclusion." Next, you want to provide a summary of the major points of your argument. Again, this would be important because the audience is listening to your speech. They don't have a written copy in front of them, and so repetition is useful, as we saw in the MLK Jr. I Have a Dream speech, how he so effectively used repetition to cement into the mind of his audience those ideas that he wanted them to remember. Finally, you want to end your conclusion with a call to action. You want to tell the audience what you want them to do with this information. How do you want it to change them in their beliefs, or how do you want them to act on it if they were to actually agree with your position. And this can be accomplished in various ways, and I've provided a link again that you can click on and take a look at several different ways that you can end your speech, some of which might be more effective than others depending upon your topic. So what should you do next? Well, the first thing that I would do is I would review your source material. You have an additional 10 sources that you need to add to your bibliography, so get started right away. Start doing some reading and writing, and and get that bibliography put together. Next, you'll want to mark any quotations that you think you might want to use along with the citations that go along with them. And yes, you should include citation information in the sentence outline. It's very easy to refer to it with something as simple as a tag as according to the Wall Street Journal or something like that. Next, you'll want to collect some visuals to help you illustrate your points. But remember, you do not want to use PowerPoint to project your entire speech outline. That's not what it's for. The visuals are merely there to help augment or amplify the message of the speech. So think about using the visuals in their strongest sense, which would be an appeal to pathos. Number 5, you want to use all the tools and concepts that you've learned this semester. 6, organize your speech well. 7, focus on the questions at the heart of the controversy. Remember, don't get bogged down in policy details and minutiae. 8, remember to identify the fallacies, and don't forget to paint pictures with words. Again, if you click on this link, it'll take you to a short page on the Patrick Henry website with some of the most common rhetorical devices. 9, make sure that you end with an appeal to action. Remember, the end of persuasion is action. We talked about that at the very beginning of the course. So what do you want your audience to do? And then finally, after you give your speech, remember that you're going to be uploading your artifacts, the sentence outline, the reflection, any images or PowerPoint that you use. All of those will be, and the annotated bibliography, all of those will be uploaded to the Persuasive Speech assignment submission space on It's Learning. You will not need to do anything with the ePortfolio. Remember, we are discontinuing that for this semester. Again, just as a reminder, after you've given your speech, remember to upload all the artifacts to the It's Learning Persuasive Speech assignment space. So that would be your sentence outline, annotated bibliography, any visuals or PowerPoint that you might have used, and your reflection. Let's take a moment and take a look at a sample persuasive speech outline. This will encapsulate some of the information that I just talked about. You can see here that there is a specific format that I want you to use with name, title, and a specific purpose. Your speech should have a title, by the way. Then you can see that in the introduction there are several different moves that should happen here. Your attention grabber, where you recap the issues that constitute the heart of the matter. A credibility statement, in other words, why are you talking about this speech topic? Create your connection to the topic, and then relate that topic to the audience. Why is it important to them? Next, you would move into the thesis statement, which would clarify the goal of your speaking topic. What do you want to persuade them to think, act, change, or move, or do? And finally, you'll move into what's called the preview of the main points. And the preview statement here in the introduction acts as a transition statement into the body of the speech. One thing I'm really going to look for in this particular speech is your ability to create a speech that flows very smoothly, both in the delivery as well as in the content. And the only way it can do that is if you provide transition statements between your sections of the speech. After the preview statement leads into the body, you will talk about the main argument. You can see that I have laid it out the way that it should look as far as dividing it up by main points and subpoints. You can insert your visual wherever it makes sense. I just put it in a space here just to show you what it might look like, but I actually want you to cue it up in your outline, highlight it somehow or bold it in some way so that you can readily recognize where it's at when you are speaking. Notice that there is a transition statement that should happen between the major points, major subpoints, of the main point there. And then between main points, you should have a transition sentence that leads into the next section. The next section, of course, being the counter argument. Again, a transition sentence that will lead into the conclusion. And notice that the conclusion has 3 moves to it, signaling to the end, summarizing main ideas, and then closing with a call to action. I skipped over the counter argument here, but I did talk about that earlier, the fact that you want to briefly explain the opposing view and then in the rebuttal, refute the opposing side. Okay, so again, thinking about what you